Most protection spells you'll find online are designed to make you feel safe, not to actually work, and there's a reason the old ones didn't care about your comfort. Modern protection magic is built almost entirely on visualization and intention. You imagine white light. You set boundaries with crystals. You declare your space sacred and hope that's enough. And look, intention matters, but ancient protection magic didn't rely on it. It was built on threat and reciprocity. You weren't asking the universe to protect you. You were making a deal with something specific, or you were making yourself so dangerous that crossing you had consequences. The shift happened when occultism went from folk practice to bookstore commodity in the 1960s and 70s. Everything got softened to be palatable, marketable, safe for mass consumption. The edge got filed off. What was left were the aesthetics of protection without the mechanisms that actually made it work. Real protective magic wasn't about surrounding yourself in white light bubbles. It was about making yourself too dangerous to touch, too protected by something else to risk offending, or too richly bound to mess with without serious fallout. You weren't just defended, you were a bad idea. And that's the piece that got lost. The part where protection wasn't passive. It had teeth. Here's what actually happened when someone in the ancient world needed protection. They didn't light a candle and whisper good vibes into the universe. They went to work. In the Greco-Roman world, if you wanted to bind someone who threatened you, a rival, a thief, an enemy, you inscribed a curse tablet. A defixio. You named the spirit you were calling. You threatened consequences if they didn't show up. You invoked underworld gods as enforcers. Hecate, Hermes Thonios, Persephone. You weren't asking nicely. You were making a contract with the dead. In Egypt, warding wasn't symbolic. It was architectural. Protective spells were carved into doorways, written on walls, woven into the structure of a home. Consecrated objects, amulets, statues, inscribed stones, housed actual protective entities. You didn't just believe something was watching over you. Something was. Because you put it there. And all of it was transactional. You gave offerings. Blood. Time. Devotion. You fed the spirits. You honored the gods. You maintained the relationship. In exchange, something else stood watch. The idea that you could just intend safety without offering anything in return? That you could manifest protection with positive thinking alone? They would have laughed you out of the temple. Protection costs something. It always has. And when we pretend it doesn't, we're not being spiritual. We're being naive. There were 3 ways protection magic actually functioned, and they all relied on principles that made psychological and spiritual sense. First, apotropaic magic. That's the art of repelling through sheer overwhelming presence. You didn't hide from the malicious gaze. You met it with something so ugly, so powerful, or so sacred that it couldn't come closer. Gorgon faces glared from shields and doorways. The evil eye got reflected back on itself with mirrored charms. Hecate's name was carved into thresholds because even malevolent spirits knew better than to cross a boundary she claimed. The logic was simple. Some things are too dangerous to approach, even for danger itself. Second, binding and containment. If you knew threat was coming, a rival's curse, a spirit's attention, someone's active ill will, you didn't just ward it off. You trapped it. Wax dolls got pierced and buried. Cords were knotted with the enemy's name spoken into each twist. Jars were filled with rusty nails, broken glass, and written accusations, then sealed and hidden where they'd never be found. The hostile force didn't dissipate. It just got locked in a space where it couldn't reach you, spinning itself out against walls you built. Third, alliance magic. This wasn't prayer. It was negotiation. You made pacts with protective spirits, ancestors, or deities who had reasons to keep you alive, because you fed them, honored them, or served purposes they needed fulfilled. You weren't asking nicely. You were creating obligation. Reciprocity bound both ways, and that's what made it work. You'll notice 3 things show up over and over in protection magic, no matter where you look. Blood, iron, thresholds. And they're not there because they look cool in a grimoire illustration. They're there because they work. Blood wasn't symbolic. It was a boundary marker with weight. When you offered blood, you were proving something. You were putting skin in the game, literally, and the spirits you called knew it. It said, this matters enough that I'm willing to bleed for it. That kind of offering doesn't get ignored. Iron disrupts. That's why horseshoes, nails, and blades show up in protection magic from Europe to the Middle East to Asia. Iron breaks enchantment. It holds the line. Fae can't cross it. Curses falter near it. You hammer nails into door frames not as decoration, but as a barrier that actually does something. And then there's thresholds. Doorways, windows, crossroads, anywhere the boundary between worlds goes thin. These are the places where things slip through, so they're where you ward first and you ward hardest. You paint symbols. You bury charms. You don't leave them open. Here's the thing people miss when they strip protection magic down to white candles and good vibes. These elements aren't aesthetic. They're functional. Removing them from the practice is like pulling the foundation out from under a house and wondering why it collapses. The magic was never just about intention. It was about materials that held power and knowing how to use them. Here's what happens when you strip the bones out. You end up with a practice that soothes anxiety but doesn't shift anything material. It feels good. It calms you down. And that's fine. That's therapy, not magic. There's nothing wrong with therapy. But call it what it is. Don't mistake the feeling of safety for actual protection. The protective entities that used to do the heavy lifting, they stop showing up. Because there's no reason to. No offering means no relationship. No sustained attention means no partnership. You can't build a working bond with something by lighting a candle once and then forgetting it exists. The old practitioners knew this. They fed their spirits. They honored them. They showed up consistently, not just when they were scared. And when you don't do that, you're just talking to yourself in a dark room. Which, again, can be comforting. But it won't stop anything. And when something does push through, something with weight, something that doesn't care about your boundaries or your good intentions, you're left holding vibes and visualization against a force that doesn't care about either. That's the gap. That's what gets lost when you pretty it up. You don't need to reconstruct the ancient world. But you do need to understand how it worked, and the first rule was always reciprocity. If you're calling on something for protection, what are you giving in return? Not once. Not when it's convenient. Consistently. Offerings left with intention. Devotional time that isn't just crisis management. Acts done in their name, out in the world, where it costs you something. Protection isn't a vending machine. It's a relationship, and relationships require maintenance. Make it physical. Protection magic works better when it exists in the world. Carved sigils, buried jars, objects on altars, things that take up space and hold intention over time. The ancient world knew this. Amulets weren't just symbols, they were anchors. They made the invisible real. Your protection should have weight. It should be something you can touch. And here's the part nobody wants to hear. Get comfortable with the edge. Real protection magic isn't gentle. It's not all love and light. It's the boundary that says this far and no further, and it has to mean it. The spirits and forces that protect don't respond to politeness. They respond to respect, clarity, and follow through. They need to know you won't flinch when it matters. Protection was never about building walls. It was about becoming the thing nothing wanted to cross. Follow Blackfire Atelier. I'll see you in the shadows.